meaningful. They can be signs, warnings, reflections of health. Nightmares can be blamed on food, moral anxiety, or even supernatural influences. You picture a Victorian person waking up after a vivid dream and immediately blaming their supper, their conscience, and perhaps the moon. And if they can't sleep, they may worry that something is wrong not just physically but spiritually. You close your eyes and let your mind drift through these possibilities. Noise, light, digestion, nerves, morality, gender expectations, air, dreams. It's a lot. No wonder the Victorians create so many cures. They are trying to soothe not just a body, but an entire worldview that believes the night is a test. You adjust the blanket and feel the lavender again. It's gentle. It doesn't judge you. Lavender doesn't care if you've been morally upright. Lavender is just lavender. And in this moment, you decide that maybe the Victorian obsession with etiquette and tonics is partly because they crave control. The night is uncertain. Sleep is uncertain. But if you can create rituals, lavender sachets, bedtime rules, special drinks, you can feel as if you're doing something. You're not helpless. You're participating. That, in itself, is soothing. You breathe slowly and imagine the city outside settling. Perhaps the carts will stop. Perhaps the voices will fade. Perhaps even the gas lamps will seem less bright. You are still awake, but you are beginning to understand the Victorian insomniac. Not a dramatic figure, but a tired one, trying to navigate a world that is speeding up. And as you drift toward the next part of the journey, you begin to feel curiosity about what the doctors say, what the experts of the era believe about sleep, and how they try to explain the mysterious act of drifting off. Because soon you'll step into the Victorian medical mind where sleep is a chemical, a moral duty, a digestive process, and sometimes, if you're unlucky, a problem that can be solved with a bottle of something labeled soothing elixir in suspiciously cheerful font. You're still in bed, still wrapped in that firm Victorian blanket, still listening to London breathe outside your window like a very large, damp animal. But now your mind begins to wander in a different direction. Not into worries, but into questions. Because once you start thinking like a Victorian, you can't help it. You begin to wonder what sleep actually is. Not in the modern way where you pull up an article titled 10 Reasons You're Awake and immediately regret it. In the Victorian way where you imagine sleep as a mysterious mechanical process, like your body is a factory, and at night someone switches off the steam. And in the 19th century, that question, what sleep is and why it fails, becomes something doctors talk about with increasing confidence. You can practically hear them already. The confident cough, the rustle of papers, the slow, dramatic pause before saying, "My dear fellow, the problem is your digestion." You roll slightly onto your side. The mattress doesn't yield much, but it does make a sound like a polite complaint. Now, mainstream historical fact, the Victorian era is a period of rapid medical change. Germ theory begins to take hold later in the century, anesthesia is introduced in the 1840s, and hospitals and public health systems slowly evolve. But when it comes to sleep, the science is still, let's call it, creative. Victorian doctors are working without EEGs, without sleep labs, without a clear understanding of hormones or circadian rhythms. They observe, they theorize, they argue in journals, and they write long books full of advice that ranges from surprisingly sensible to deeply strange. And you, lying there in your little London room, become the imaginary patient. You picture yourself visiting a physician the next day. He has a tidy office with dark wood furniture and shelves of books. He has sideburns, obviously, and he looks at you over spectacles like you are personally responsible for the decline of sleep in Western civilization. You explain that you can't fall asleep. He nods slowly, as if this is both tragic and extremely interesting. Victorians often describe insomnia as wakefulness, sleeplessness, or want of sleep. It's not yet the clinical category it becomes later, but it is absolutely recognized as a problem, especially among the urban middle class, who have enough leisure to notice they're miserable. The doctor begins to explain that sleep is not simply rest. It is a vital function, a resetting of the nervous system, a cooling of the brain, a time when digestion finishes its work, a period when the mind stops spending energy like a reckless aristocrat. One of the major Victorian theories is that sleep is linked to blood flow. They believe that when you sleep, blood flow to the brain decreases. Less blood, less activity. It's like dimming the lights in a room. This idea comes from earlier physiological theories, and it persists for quite a while. So if you can't sleep, perhaps your brain is too congested with blood. Perhaps you are thinking too hard. Perhaps you are too excited. Perhaps you have been reading French novels. The doctor might recommend that you calm the circulation, cool the head, warm the feet, shift the blood away from the brain. Yes, really. And honestly, this is where you start to see the roots of certain modern sleep tricks. Warm feet, cool room, calming routine. They don't have the science right, but they're circling the same truth. The body likes cues. Quirky tidbit. Some Victorian advice suggests putting mustard plasters on the feet to draw blood downward. If you've never heard of a mustard plaster, imagine a spicy foot wrap designed by someone who thinks discomfort is therapeutic. It's basically a Victorian way of saying, you'll sleep because your feet are too busy being offended. You smile faintly into your pillow. That's joke one for this section. Victorian sleep medicine is sometimes just bullying your body into compliance. Another major theory revolves around digestion. Victorians believe the stomach has enormous influence over sleep. A heavy meal, a rich dessert, alcohol, even the wrong kind of tea. These can cause wakefulness by disturbing digestion, producing gas, irritating the nerves, or sending impure blood to the brain. So the doctor asks you what you eat at supper. You hesitate. You remember the fish dinner smell outside. You remember your own meal earlier, perhaps a bit too much bread, perhaps something fried, perhaps a questionable pudding. The doctor sighs like a man who has seen too many puddings ruin too many lives. He recommends a lighter evening meal. Soup, toast, milk, nothing rich, nothing spicy, nothing that makes the stomach feel like it has to hold a meeting. This is also where Victorians begin to develop an obsession with nightcaps. Not the modern meaning. The drink. Warm milk, sometimes mixed with spices or alcohol. Cocoa, gruel, barley water. Mild drinks designed to soothe digestion and encourage drowsiness. And as you lie there, you imagine that warm, thick Victorian milk. Maybe slightly sweetened, maybe with nutmeg. Being carried up the stairs in a little cup. It's oddly comforting. Then there's the nervous system. Victorian medicine is deeply invested in nerves. The nerves are like the telegraph lines of the body, carrying signals, sensations, emotions. And if those lines are overloaded, sleep becomes impossible. Doctors describe insomnia as a symptom of nervous exhaustion. They talk about the brain being overworked, the mind being overstimulated, the nerves being irritable. They recommend rest, not just physical but mental. Less reading, less social excitement, less intense conversation. Imagine being told you can't sleep because you had too much conversation. Honestly, that's relatable. Historians still argue whether Victorian nervous disorders were primarily biological conditions or reflections of social anxieties about modernization and productivity. But the language of nerves becomes a way to explain why people feel overwhelmed. You adjust your pillow and think about the city outside, trains, factories, telegraphs. London is a network of constant motion. No wonder people's nerves feel stretched. Victorians also experiment with sedatives. Not just herbal ones, but chemical ones. Bromides become popular later in the century. Chloral hydrate is introduced in the 1860s as a sedative and becomes widely used. Opium derivatives remain common. These substances are often prescribed with the confidence of someone who does not yet have a full understanding of addiction or long-term effects. Mainstream historical fact: chloral hydrate becomes a widely used sleep aid in the late 19th century, sometimes called a knockout drop, and it's prescribed for insomnia and nervous conditions. It works. It also has risks, especially with repeated use. But for many Victorians, it's a miracle. Imagine being exhausted for weeks, unable to sleep, and then someone gives you something that finally shuts off the lights in your brain. Of course, it feels like magic. You can also see the danger. It's tempting. It's relief in a bottle. You lie there and think, the Victorian era is both inventing modern medicine and stumbling into modern problems. Doctors also recommend exercise, but not too much. This is very Victorian. Everything must be moderate. Walking is encouraged. Gentle outdoor activity. Fresh air. But too much exertion can excite the body and disturb sleep. So you picture yourself strolling in a park at dusk, as the doctor recommends. Not running. Certainly not sweating. Sweating is suspicious. The doctor also asks about your bed. Is it too soft? Too hard? Too warm? Too cold? Is the room ventilated? Is there dampness? Is there mold? Victorians are terrified of damp. Damp is blamed for everything from rheumatism to melancholy. A damp bedroom is considered practically a villain. They also believe that bedding should be clean, aired out, and not overly heavy. Feather beds are popular, but some doctors criticize them as too warm and too soft, trapping moisture and encouraging languor. Yes, languor, which sounds like a romance novel character but is actually a medical complaint. The doctor may recommend a horsehair mattress, firm, breathable, which sounds less like comfort and more like sleeping on a polite broom. You can't help laughing quietly. Joke 2. The Victorians really said, what if we made beds less enjoyable for health? But there's something sincere behind it. They're trying to create the ideal conditions for sleep. Cool, fresh, calm. They also recommend routines. Victorian doctors often emphasize regularity, going to bed at the same time, waking at the same time, eating meals at consistent hours. They believe the body thrives on habit. And again, they're not wrong. Even if their explanations involve blood congestion and rebellious stomachs. You lie there and feel the truth of it. Your body wants rhythm. The city wants rhythm too, even if it's a chaotic one. Now, some Victorian sleep advice gets truly odd. There are recommendations for sleeping with certain objects nearby, for wearing specific fabrics, for placing magnets near the bed. Yes, magnets. The late 19th century sees a rise in fascination with electricity and magnetism. People begin to imagine that the body is an electrical system and that magnets can influence health. Quirky tidbit: magnetic therapy devices are marketed for various ailments, including nervous conditions and sleeplessness. Some people genuinely believe a magnetized belt or mattress can calm the nerves. Historians still argue whether such devices were pure quackery or whether some users experienced placebo benefits from the ritual and belief. Either way, the market thrives. You picture yourself lying in bed, surrounded by magnets like a human compass. If nothing else, it would make you feel like a scientific experiment, which might be distracting enough to help you sleep. That's joke 3. If you can't sleep, just become magnetic. At least then you'll have a personality trait. As the night continues, you imagine the Victorian medical world pressing in around you. Doctors writing treatises, patients trying remedies, families sharing advice. Sleep becomes a topic of culture, not just biology. And you begin to understand why the Victorian era produces so many sleep cures. They are living through rapid change. They are adjusting to new rhythms, new technologies, new anxieties. They are also, in many ways, inventing modern insomnia. You breathe slowly, letting your thoughts soften. The lavender is still there, quietly doing its job. The city outside begins to settle, or perhaps you are simply becoming less aware of it. And you feel yourself drifting closer to sleep, even as your mind remains curious. Because the next thing you'll encounter is not the doctor's office, but the bedroom itself, the etiquette, the rules, the rituals of how to sleep properly. In the Victorian world, you don't just collapse into bed. You retire, and you do it with the seriousness of someone preparing for a small, nightly ceremony. You remain in bed, but now the room around you feels different. Less like a random lodging and more like a stage. The Victorian bedroom is not merely a place where you sleep. It is a space where you prove, quietly and with a straight face, that you are a respectable person who deserves rest. And the Victorians, bless them, take this very seriously. You lie there and imagine how a proper Victorian would approach bedtime. Not the way you do it now, scrolling, bargaining with yourself, whispering just one more video like a tiny bedtime gremlin. No, the Victorian approach is a ritual, a slow unbuttoning of the day. And tonight, you're going to learn the etiquette of retiring. Mainstream historical fact: Victorian etiquette manuals and household guides frequently include instructions on bedroom conduct, cleanliness, ventilation, and proper routines, reflecting the era's belief that moral character and health were tied to domestic order. So yes, how you sleep is, in a way, part of how you behave. You start by picturing the moment the household begins to wind down. In a middle-class home, the lamps in the sitting room are turned lower. The fire is banked. Voices soften. There's a gradual retreat from public life into private life. If you're in a wealthy home, the process is even more elaborate. Servants prepare hot water. They lay out night clothes. They warm the bed with a brass bed warming pan, basically a metal skillet full of embers slid between the sheets so you don't climb into an icebox. And yes, it's as dangerous as it sounds if someone is careless. There are real accounts of bedding catching fire from overheated bed warmers. It's the Victorian version of leaving your electric blanket on maximum and then falling asleep on top of it. You smile faintly at that. Joke 1. Victorian bedtime includes the exciting possibility of spontaneous combustion, just to keep things lively. But in most homes, the ritual is simpler. You, in your modest room, must be your own servant. You've already washed up and changed, but now you begin to focus on the room itself. Victorians believe the bedroom must be prepared like a sacred space. First, air. Even now, lying under the covers, you can sense the air in the room. Cool, slightly stale, faintly smoky. Victorian advice writers insist that fresh air is essential. Many recommend opening the window before bed, even for a short time, to change the air. They fear stagnant air. They fear miasma, the old theory that disease spreads through bad air. Even as germ theory begins to rise, the habit of ventilation remains strong. So you consider it. You slip out of bed, your feet meeting the cold floor with an immediate complaint from your toes. You cross to the window and crack it open just a little. A breath of night air enters. It smells of damp stone and soot and distant river water. It's not exactly alpine meadow freshness, but it is cooler. Feels like the room exhales. You close it again after a moment, not wanting to freeze. But you understand the instinct. The room feels clearer, as if your lungs have more space. Second, order. Victorians love order. A tidy bedroom is seen as healthier, calmer, and morally superior. Disorder suggests carelessness, and carelessness suggests everything else. Laziness, weakness, potentially even crime. You never know with Victorians. So you straighten the bedclothes, adjust the pillow, fold your day clothes neatly on the chair. You place your boots where they belong. And now, with everything in place, the room feels like it's ready to hold sleep. Third, modesty. This is a big one. Victorian bedroom etiquette is deeply tied to ideas of propriety. Night clothes are not just for warmth. They are for decency. Even alone, people are encouraged to dress properly for bed. There are even instructions about how to behave if you share a room with someone, siblings, friends, family. You are expected to turn away while changing, to keep yourself covered, to maintain a sense of privacy even in shared spaces. It's as if the Victorians fear that if you see too much ankle in the wrong lighting, the entire empire will collapse. Joke 2. Victorian etiquette makes it clear, if your nightshirt rides up, the monarchy trembles. But beyond humor, modesty is also about comfort. Night clothes are designed to be loose, breathable, easy to wash. Linen and cotton are common. Wool is avoided for sleeping if possible, because it can itch and overheat. The Victorians are very concerned about overheating at night. They warn against too many blankets, too many heavy quilts, too much warmth. They believe overheating can cause nightmares, sweating, and disturbed sleep. This is one of those moments where Victorian advice aligns with modern sleep science. Cooler temperatures tend to support better sleep. They don't know about core body temperature cycles, of course. They just know that waking up drenched and miserable is not ideal. So you adjust your blankets, making sure they're warm but not smothering. You feel the weight settle over you like a firm hug. Now comes the emotional etiquette. Victorian guides often recommend that bedtime should be calm. No intense discussion, no arguments, no exciting novels, no shocking news. They suggest prayer, quiet reflection, perhaps a gentle reading of something morally uplifting. The idea is to settle the mind and prepare the spirit for rest. Some households truly do end the day with prayer. Others simply end it with silence. And you, lying there, imagine a Victorian person folding their hands, whispering gratitude, asking for protection through the night. Whether you share their beliefs or not, the ritual has a soothing quality. It marks a transition, tells the brain, the day is over. Quirky tidbit. Some Victorian advice suggests that you should avoid sleeping while angry or upset, because emotions are believed to work upon the nerves and disturb rest. This leads to a kind of bedtime diplomacy, people trying to settle conflicts before sleep, not because of emotional health but because insomnia is inconvenient. You can picture it. Darling, I forgive you for that remark about my mother, because I need 8 hours. Historians still argue whether Victorian bedtime rituals were primarily driven by genuine health beliefs or by cultural expectations of self-control and respectability. But either way, they create structure, and structure is comforting.